My friends. This is Deepak again, and I'm here with my great friend Eddie Stern. We are back again and continuing our series on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and of course, our series is called Yoga for Enlightenment. So, thank you for joining me again, Eddie.
Of course.
And today we start talking about the final stages of our Eightfold Path to Enlightenment, dharna, dhyan, samadhi. Actually, we did started already, but we are now addressing the vibhutis. And I received some of your notes on the first vibhuti, that on time, is it?
Yes.
Okay, now I have several versions of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and this particular sequence that you sent me, um, is it everywhere or is it just a particular translation or particular commentary on chapter three, or is this very standard, this sequence?
Well, this is standard, the sequence of the different, 25 vibhutis. However, what I sent you was also my translation of them. So, you're going to see some different words in different translations, but basically they are going to follow the same thing. In Sutra number 16, in chapter 3, the first vibhuti is basically on time. But what Patanjali says is the samyama on the parinama. So he uses a lot of Sanskrit terms. But it's basically time is the first one, and then the second one is on words and the sounds that make up words, and then the third one after that is going to be on latent impressions. So they do all follow that same sequence.
And the word Vibhuti directly translated means?
Well, it means a perfection. It means an attainment. It means that everything that we can meditate on, any object in the world, whether it's a star or our navel or an idea, has inherent within it a particular characteristic or dharma. And that particular characteristic is the nature of the thing. And when we direct our focused awareness towards it, so that we embody or take or completely reflect the dharma of the object, the power of that object then shines forth in the field of our mind. And then we reflect what that thing is. So when we, for example, when we do the samyama on um, on friendship, then we get the strength of friendliness and the strength of the heart, the heart center there. So that even the meditation on friendship and the samyama on friendship means that this concept of maitri has a power within it, which is latent in the power of friendship, of that relationship. And when the power of that relationship that we can have through friendliness completely is the only thing that fills our field of chitta, the field of the mind, then we develop that power, or we become a perfect reflection of it. So it can be something like friendship, it can be something like strength, it can be something like the navel, as I said before, to understand the whole construct of the body. But the first one that we start with here, which is so crucially important with Patanjali, is the idea of time. And so, shall I talk about that for a couple of minutes? Or do you want to talk about
What are we doing with this vibhuti, of course, which is attainment and perfection
it?
and all that, siddhi, same thing, right? Siddhi is the perfection of that experience. In the first samyama, what are we actually doing samyama on? on? Are we doing samyama on time?
Okay, right. Okay, so good question. The first thing to remind ourselves of is the overarching objective and the overarching project of Patanjali is to see the distinction between Purusha consciousness and Prakriti nature. And nature is mutative, it changes. That's part of its characteristic is to change. And consciousness doesn't change. And when consciousness gets mixed up somehow with the changeability of nature, consciousness identifies with nature and thinks that it is those objects. So the job of yoga that we have is an unmixing of our ability to be aware, or the consciousness inherent within us, to unmix that from the changing objects. Now, the mechanism for identity is vritti. A vritti is a fluctuation. It's a thought. And one thought will arise and then it will fade and then another will come to take its place. And the thought that we had or through an experience earlier is going to be a samskara, which is a memory. And so we have billions of memories or samskaras that are making up the subconscious field that we exist in. And from these memories are arising desires, and these desires are fueling our behavior, our actions. So we have a memory, we have an inherent desire, do I want to repeat that or not repeat that? And that's going to direct my behavior. So where are these memories? Well, these memories, for lack of a better location, are in the past. And when they arise as a desire, it is coming into the present moment for us, which is causing us to have an idea about a future that we would like to attain. And so the samskara, vasana, and karma cycle, or this vritti samskara chakra, it's called, is basically keeping us trapped in time because we are driven by our past experiences that are arising as present desires, making us wish for a repetitive type of a future. And so because the vrittis exist in this idea of time, we have to understand time in order to understand how our mind is functioning so that we can master it. So the mastery of time is going to be the first, or the experience or understanding of time is going to become the first step towards the ability to direct our minds where we want it to be for as long as we want it to remain there. So does that make sense? Is that,
See, when I do the sutra practice, say on friendliness, that's the intention. Dharana is friendliness. The
Mhm.
object is friendliness, and then I'm in that mode of meditation, and I get to samadhi, and then in samadhi, I become the embodiment of friendliness, right? Now, what are we doing in this case? Are we
Okay,
doing some? Where is the samyama? On what is the samyama?
great. So the samyama here is on three things,
Mhm.
because the parinama, or change, as the nature of objects, is what we are going to be doing samyama on. And there are three parts of it. Number one, the first change that we experience is the characteristic of an object, which is called the dharma of an object. And the second one is the lakshana, or the temporal characteristic, that thing within time. And then the third is called the avastha, or the reference we have for the object. So let's take um, uh, gold as an example. This is a common example which is given in the commentaries already. The dharma of gold is to be gold. You know, it's to shine and it's to have the value that it has. And so the substance of gold is going to be unchanging. That's the characteristic. Now, say you have a gold bracelet, and and that gold bracelet has it's gotten old, so you're gonna or you've had it for some time or whatever. So you melt the gold bracelet down and you make an earring. And so now the gold of the earring is the same of the gold as the bracelet. The substance has not changed, but the defining outer characteristic has changed. Okay, so that's the first thing that we meditate on as dharma, that the substance is the same, but the outer form is going to change. And then the next thing is the temporal characteristic of an object. In the past, it was a bracelet, and then I melted it in the present, and then in the future, it becomes an earring. Okay, so this is time change. And then there is the relationship that I have with it, which is the avastha. And that means that when you gave me this earring, it was new, but now after 5 years, the earring is old. And so that's my viewpoint on the object as it is. So what Patanjali says and what Vyasa says is that the only thing which is real of those three is the substance. And so we meditate on the avastha, or the relationship of old and new that we have to it as illusory. And we meditate on the lakshana, the changing characteristic through time, also as illusory, so that we get to the defining dharma of that substance and recognize that as the only real thing, and everything else is a changing form. So in Sankhya, what we'll say is that all these three samyamas lead us to this awareness that that awareness, actually it leads us to the awareness that nature is the only intrinsic substance which connects all other forms that appear to change in time. But actually, they're all one thing. They're all nature, and they arise out of nature and they fall back into nature when they go into an equilibrium. Similar to in Vedanta and non-dualist Vedanta, where we say that all forms are, arising, and they are consciousness, they appear in consciousness, and they go back into consciousness. So Sankhya is slightly different, but without getting too complicated, we can say that the only one substance that all forms are made up of is nature, but we see them as distinct. And what happens when we see them as distinct? We form a relationship with them that, like, say you're in a relationship with someone, and when you first met them, you were hanging out, and you were both going to bars and nightclubs and stuff like that. And then that person started doing yoga and meditation, and you were still going to the nightclubs. And after a year, you look at this person you're dating, and they're getting up at 5 a.m. and they're chanting Om, and you look at them and you go, well, they're so different now. They've completely changed. They don't make me happy anymore. They're not the person who I thought they were. So what has happened there is that, your mind hasn't changed, but the person has changed. So you're no longer happy. But it could be the other way around as well, that maybe the person stays the same, but your mind changes so that you're no longer happy. But all that is a misunderstanding of our relationship with objects, that really all of this is nature coming in and expressing itself in one form based on karma or whatever, and then eventually it goes back into nature, into an equilibrium. So to understand the relationship with the changes that occur in objects that we identify with, that then cause us to be happy or sad or get lost in the myriad of ways, to go beyond that, first we understand, time, past, present, and future is illusory, and it only has to do with my relationship to how I'm viewing things. But if I understand the underlying substance that all things are prakriti and all things arise and fall and then go back to where they were, then I begin to see a distinction between my relationship to the object and the power the object has over me. So now I'm going to use my own discernment and strength of mind to master the control that objects of the world have over me. And that's where we begin to find that. So why does it have to do with time? Because objects change in time, and so does our mind. And so that's the first samyama. So the power that you get, the thing that comes out from that, is a knowledge of things that happened in the past, because you fully understand time, and therefore you can understand things that will happen in the future. So this is basically being able to see in the future, being able to see the things in the past, even that you weren't there for. And
Okay.
that's the first Vibhuti.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you have explained the first Vibhuti very, very elegantly and very carefully, um, let me share with you some insights that I've been having in the last week as a result of my discussions with some very eminent physicists, including Nobel laureates. I'll be happy to send you
Yeah.
the video that I did with Nobel laureate on the nature of reality. So, this book that he wrote about, it's called Fundamentals, and then there are 12 principles on the nature of reality, what creates reality. And he starts out by saying that the fundamental ingredients of reality are space time and then matter, of course, but also as we go deeper into the nature of space time and matter, force fields, gravity, electromagnetism, and weak interactions. And we've all kind of dabbled in this over the years. The four forces of nature: electromagnetism, strong interaction, which keeps the nucleus intact because of the strong force, and then weak interaction, which is responsible for transformation and radioactive decay, and then gravity, which is peculiarly different because it's the curvature of space time. And it's a very elegant book that goes into the nature of what is actually happening at the deepest levels of nature. Now, of course, science operates as we currently know it on several principles. One is subject object split. I'm the observer and I'm studying what we call the objects of perception, but also refined perception with instruments and ultraviolet and cosmic rays and all of that, radio waves, everything. So it's not just perception, but all the extensions of human perception possible. So one is that, and that we can observe the world. The second is reductionism, that we try to understand the whole by dividing it into bits and pieces. That's science today. If you don't address reductionism, then you're not being strictly scientist. So one is you have a physicalist ontology, which means the ontological primitive of the universe is matter, whatever that is. And then second is the subject-object split. Subject is different from the object. And third is reductionism. I can understand the universe by breaking it into bits and pieces. Now, all that is becoming a little questionable because the subject of experience is also an activity of the object. If the object is the total universe, then the subject of experience is also a behavior of the total universe. So subject and object are, in the deeper reality, a unified experience. You can't have an object without a subject, just like you can't have the observed without an observer, and knower without somebody knows. Okay, and of course, Maharishi used to talk about the samhita of observer, observing, and observed, knower, knowing, and known. Samhita, the togetherness of these three. And the words he used those days were Rishi, Devata, and Chanda. So Rishi is the observer, Devata is the perceptual and cognitive activity. It's divine because it gives us the ability to observe. The observing is the Devata, and that which is observed we used to be called Chandas, matter. So Rishi, seer, Devata, seeing, and Chandas, that which is seen, scenery. But they're all contained in the one samadhi, in the one unified consciousness. So that was our view. And where science is going right now is reductionism is being seen as a complementarity of holism. And so reductionism and holism could be what are called complementary activities of the same underlying activity, just like space and time and mass and energy and all of that. Um, and so science is beginning to see that the observer and observed may be a unified complementary manifestation of the same deeper reality, which we're calling consciousness right now. Now, of course, science says that I can move my hand by thinking about it. I can speak by thinking about it. I can perform voluntary actions starting with a thought. And actually, everything that I experience is in some way a sensation. Sensations, perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts, they're all entangled. If I think of my mother, I see her face, etc., etc. I see her image, I hear her voice, I feel a sensation, I feel an emotion. So they're all entangled. The source of thought is also the source of all other experience, perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts, emotions. So when we speak to scientists, if they're strictly physicalists and they're not, contemplative, the only problem is how does the interaction of force fields and particles and waves and gravity ultimately gives rise to experience, thought, feeling, emotion, imagination. And that's called the hard problem. And, you talk to scientists, including Nobel laureates, they say we'll figure it out. But at this moment, we don't know how matter fields or force fields create all these experiences, including, very subjective experiences like love and compassion and language and longing and inspiration and insight and contemplative self-inquiry, storytelling, the capacity to create models, poetry, music. How do force fields and all these things do that? And there's no answer, by the way, when you go there. So when I was talking to this Nobel Prize winning physicist, um, uh, whose video I'll send to you. In the book, also, he talks about the most fundamental modern ingredients of matter, the most fundamental. And so he says the most fundamental modern ingredients of matter are mass, spin, and charge. Listen to this very carefully. Spin, charge, and mass. Then he goes on to say, mass, spin, and charge have no intrinsic size or shape. They are structureless points where mass, spin, and charge reside. Okay, structureless points where mass, spin, and charge reside. And um, these are the fundamental raw materials that ultimately create the universe. But we just read this, that they are structureless points. Structureless points. They're actually mathematical entities that then can be experienced through modern technology, ultra microscopes and stroboscopic microscopes and hadron colliders. You see that the most fundamental aspects of matter are these three things. But then I asked my Nobel Prize winning physicist, I said, if they're structureless, are they matter in the conventional sense? They don't have any volume, they don't have size, they don't have shape, they're structureless. Can we call this matter? And he said, yeah, this is the new, idea of what matter is. But it's still matter because without this, there would be no physical universe, nothing physical. Not this bottle, not my hand, not your body, etc. So spin, mass, and charge are the most fundamental ingredients of what we call the physical universe. Except,
What's the
wait,
difference? Okay. What's the difference between spin and charge?
I'll come to that. Okay,
Okay.
spin is movement, it's kinetic. Charge is transformation.
Okay.
So you see, you're kind of guessing where I'm going. I'm thinking of mass, spin, and charge as the gunas.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kinetic movement that we call spin is the guna that we start out with. The vritti starts with spin.
Yeah.
Okay,
Rajas.
consciousness spins itself into vrittis,
Yeah.
and vrittis are not just thoughts; they're sensations, emotions, feelings, everything that we call experience. Okay, so that's the spinning of consciousness, and then the charge is the transformation. It's the rajas element. Okay, so sattva element is the creation as the movement of consciousness, purusha turning into prakriti. Then the charge is the fiery transformation element, and mass is inertia, it's tamas.
Yeah.
Now, if we understand that the then, and I did ask my physicist friend, I said, what you're saying is that the universe is the alchemy of these three phenomena. Let's not call them material objects because we can't see them. Okay, there's no material object there, it's structureless. So let's call them processes. And then what we see as the physical universe, everything from stars, galaxies to this, to my hand, is the alchemy of these three phenomena: creation, transformation, inertia, destruction, resurrection, creation. It's the alchemy. In fact, he used the word. The alchemy of mass, spin, and charge creates all of physical reality. So, in this model, the scientific model, there are two kinds of reality. One is the perceived reality of everyday experience. Then there's the fundamental reality of force fields, matter fields, or whatever you call them, electromagnetism, strong and weak interactions, gravity. But then as you go deeper and deeper, everything disappears into mass, energy, and charge, which now we are saying are processes. And the alchemy of the universe, the production of the universe, is the alchemy of these three forces, whether we call them sattva, rajas, tamas, we call that creation, transformation, destruction, we call it vata, pitta, kapha. So many ways, of saying these three things: seer, seeing scenery, observer, observing, observed, etc. So as I was looking at this, and I was also looking at the Western systems of philosophy, from Wittgenstein to Immanuel Kant to Schrodinger, always the fundamental question really is, what is reality? And we say reality is manifest, it's unmanifest, it's from the unmanifest to the manifest, and there's a whole process going on. The alchemy is the alchemy of the gunas, etc. But as we think in Eastern terms, I think a better word that shows up than reality is existence. If I substitute the word existence for reality, then it's much simpler, because existence simply means that which exists. And that which exists could be as ephemeral as a flash of lightning, or an insight, or a thought, or an image, or a feeling. So now, if I say existence, that includes all the vrittis: subtle mind, intellect, ego, subtle body, sukshma sharir, karan sharir. It's all vrittis. It's all vrittis. It's all prakritis, starting from Purusha. Then I don't have to worry. Is this subtle? Is this gross? It's all one flow of the vrittis, unified. And they're all correlated, because you can't have a thought without an image, you can't have an image without a sound, the tanmatras, all of that is included, okay, is the vrittis. So then you read Immanuel Kant and you read some of these modern insights into the nature of perception. I'm going there slowly right now because I want you to actually explain this in terms of Vedanta and yoga, which we will. So Immanuel Kant said, you can never know a thing in itself. You can only know how it appears. That's what he's known for, Immanuel Kant. The thing in itself is not available. Okay? You can only know what it appears to be. That's Immanuel Kant, classic. You can't know the thing in itself, only as it appears. Now, if you look at the mechanics, modern mechanics of perception, when I look at this, when I say this is a green bottle, in fact, it's everything except green. Okay? The green is what's bouncing off, is reflecting, and everything else visually is the entire electromagnetic spectrum except green. So the thing in itself, at the moment, I would say, is not green, but everything that is not green, visually. When I touch this, by the way, and modern science tells me I don't actually touch it. Electrons bump into electrons, and that resistance of electrons bumping into electrons gives me the feeling that I call touch or sensation. So actually, I never touch anything. Okay, all I see is the resistance born out of it as those electrons. Same thing with taste and smell, because taste and smell are forms of touch. Okay, so taste, smell, touch, sight, hearing. I hear only 1% of the acoustic spectrum as a human being. You know, other species hear different aspects of the acoustic spectrum. Bottom line is my senses never tell me the thing in itself. Okay, they only tell me what is being reflected and is actually, in a way, being excluded from the thing in itself so I can perceive it. In other words, we come back to neti. Everything I see is not this, not this, not this, and the thing in itself is still a mystery. But it's a mystery to Immanuel Kant, not a mystery to a yogi. Why? Because now I go over those words that you sent me, dharma. So I also looked up, and dharma is also the appearance of the object, which is its purpose, right? This appearance is the bottle. Purpose is whatever a bottle does. This appearance is hand. This is whatever the hand does. Lakshana is the transformation of character, is what I read. Okay, so when lakshana, this is water, okay, inside, but it could become vapor, it could become a rainbow, it could become a cloud, it could become a rivulet, a drop in the ocean, a puddle, uh, anything, okay, wave. So that would be the lakshana, and avastha then is the transformation of the thing in itself. And so, what is the thing in itself that Immanuel Kant couldn't get to? The thing in itself is infinite being. This is infinite being. Okay, the thing in itself is infinite being. Now, when I understand the thing in itself is infinite being, and by being I just mean existence. Ontological definition of being is existence. Period. So the fundamental existence of this is being, and that being is infinite. Okay, but it is appearing as this. And then these parinamas, the dharma, the lakshana, the avastha, the samadhi parinama, the ekagrata, the single pointed intention, I become one with this. And then I realize that this and this is Atman, which is Brahman. Now I have a clue to the siddhis. You see, these reductionists say you can lift your arm up, you can do this, you can even influence your autonomic function with a thought, but you can't bring rainbows and clouds. You can't transform this into this. But if we understand what we have just said, avastha, lakshana, dharma, ekagrata, samadhi, now we have an understanding of Vibhuti, how the understanding of unity consciousness actually allows me to see this as myself. Once I see this by myself and I experience it as myself, I open the door to the possibilities of alchemy within consciousness, not the alchemy that occurs with what do you call it, weak interactions. Weak interactions is alchemy. You said gold. I mean, the entire periodic table, starting from carbon to all the elements in the periodic table, is alchemy of what? Mass, spin, and charge. But what are mass, spin, and charge? They are the creative, the transformative, and the inertial activities of fundamental being, which is infinite and can modify itself through its own alchemy into anything whatsoever, and we call that the universe. That's why we say Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi or all these great Mahavakyas. They come from this deeper level that I and the universe are one. Atman is Brahman, you are that, I am that, Tattvamasi, all that now starts to make sense. So while the weak interaction is a physicalist interpretation of cosmic alchemy, what you just said, samadhi, ekagrata, dharma, lakshana, avastha, is the deeper alchemy that is already happening, that is modifying itself into infinite rishis, infinite devatas, and infinite chandasis, infinite seers, infinite modes of seeing, infinite sceneries, and biological organisms like you and me at this surface are nothing other than sensors, period. A biological organism is a particular combination of sensors in a universe of infinite modes of sensing. The chakras are different modes of awareness or centers of awareness with different modes of sensing. So, the second chakra is the sacral mode of sensing. This is the transformative mode of sensing. This is the loving mode of sensing. This is the creative expression mode of sensing. This is the tanmatra mode of sensing. And then I transcend all that, and it's pure knowing, which is all modes of sensing. So I think that this Vibhuti, the first Vibhuti, is the key to cosmic alchemy. And if you are on board with this, then we should explore every single Vibhuti with this as the basis. That's it from my side. Response to everything you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that this is why Patanjali places this one first, because when you understand this, then you understand the nature of all characteristics of all things, and then everything is within your grasp. So if I was going to comment on a couple of things, I was making some notes. The idea of the samadhi, where you said with the Perrier bottle, that you become the bottle, you realize that you are the bottle. You can let me know what you think of this from a Patanjalian point of view, that actually you don't see that you are the bottle, but the bottle becomes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Complementarities. You and the bottle.
And the bottle becomes
both complementary aspects. You as the body mind and the bottle as that object are complementary aspects of samadhi.
Yeah. So the mass, spin, and charge as the alchemy of all creation is really wonderful and beautiful sounding. The Sankhya would say that that those are emergent properties of nature, and that nature is this one substance that will take on the myriad of manifestation from everything invisible to visible through these three things of mass, spin, and charge. So just like you enunciated, but there's this one substance. Now, when the substance is not observed by Purusha, it ceases to exist. It's no longer there. So it's only when there's this observation of nature or substance and there's that connection that anything exists at all. So,
but if we go, Eddie, if we just eliminate words like even nature is good, but if we just say existence, and existence is synonymous with awareness because there's no knowing of existence with awareness, then it is awareness Sat Chit Ananda, Sat, the truth of awareness, bliss consciousness that is differentiating itself into creation.
Mhm.
And so, nature, awareness, existence, fundamental reality, Ein Sof, Brahman, Atman, whatever we want to call it, it's the one substance that is actually not a substance but appears as all substances because it's formless, it's borderless, and therefore it's infinite.
Yeah. And existence is experienced,
Correct.
right? And so that's a very key point because, again, if we go back to Patanjali, the one of the first things that he says in regards to right knowledge, to knowing the true nature of a thing, is direct experience.
Correct.
And that's the first essential thing. So through direct experience, we experience existence.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And another thing that I really liked was that how you said that the mass spin in charge, they had no substance. Is that what you said? Okay.
Structureless points
Structureless points. Okay, good.
with
So
no
structure.
volume
Okay.
and no shape.
Okay. So what's also interesting about that is that of the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas, they also have no structure. We only know them through inference of the behavior that they take on through all the different changes or the parinamas that we see. So they also exist without a structure, without a form. We only infer them through behavior, and that's where part of the discernment takes place. So that matches up very, very nicely. And when you talked about placing your hand against the bottle, and that you're not actually touching it, but it's the atoms creating the sensation of pressure. This was a very nice example because in the Samkhya characteristic of examining existence, we'll say, you have the elements or the mahabhutas, the pancha mahabhutas, the elements, which have form and color or give rise to form and color and taste, etc. And then we have our sense organs, which are the things that are experiencing that. So when your hand is touching up against the bottle, this is the sense organ of touch pressing against the element of stability, which is earth. And so there is an interaction between earth and what is inherent in earth is, that ability. Well, actually, it's air is touch. So, but so that's what's happening. You have like this element of earth, where stability hitting up against this element of touch through the sense organ of touch, and that's the interaction. But what happens if the mind, which is the controller of the sense organs, withdraws itself from that interaction? So if the mind withdraws itself from that interaction, then that's pratyahara. And then you're not aware that you're sitting on a chair. You're not aware that there's light in the eyes. You're not lost in the the superstition of true objects like you talk about before.
And you
So,
also mentioned last time that pratyahara is in that little space
yeah,
between breath, or it could be the space between any sensation or image or thought or feeling. It's the same gap, the pratyahara, when you withdraw the senses, you enter the gap, right?
yeah. And so that was really interesting. That thing you were saying made me thought of that. That basically you gave an example of that. The last thing I want to say, and I found really fascinating, and I didn't get to this, but you got to it with what you were saying, and that is that the um, the change in of objective things occurs within space. So change of objects occurs within space, like the change of the decay of that Perrier bottle. That's going to occur within space. But change in subjective matters, thoughts, ideas, identity, ideation, experience, these only occur in relation to time.
Yes.
So mental fluctuations, this is Hariharananda's commentary. Mental fluctuations have no spatial existence. They only exist in time. So therefore, mastery of time is essential in mastery of thought or of experience. Because what that leads to is um, the mastery of sequences. So if you are able to understand the sequence of past, present, future, and how that keeps replicating and replicating, that sequence or that krama is where time exists. But if there's no sequence, then there's no time. And if there's no time, there's no thought. And if there's no thought, then there's no changing experience of existence. There's only the stable, dwelling flow of existence as your experience, without any arising and falling of changing identities.
Yes, so this is very good what you just said, because the vrittis that we call thought are in time, they don't have location in space,
Right.
and yet the vrittis that ultimately have existence as perception do create the experience of space. And we do know that space and time are complementary aspects of the same reality. Now, I was talking recently to an English philosopher who's currently in Poland or somewhere, and his specialty is the philosophy of time. And so, what he said is very interesting. He said, what we call now, right now, has no memory, right? Right this moment, it's not a moment. The presence of now, there's no memory. This experience has never happened in the history of the universe, and actually will never again happen on this particular experience. Of course, many people are having their now moments, but now has no memory. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. If it has no memory, then the past never occurred and the future never occurs. Both are constructed now, right? And where are they constructed? As vrittis in the mind. Okay. Now has no history, now has no memory, now is unique, now never happened before, now will never happen again, and yet now never disappears. Now is timelessly, eternally now. And now, therefore, is not a moment in time. The moments in time begin with the vrittis. The past never occurred. When the past occurred, so called, it was now. When the future will occur, so called, it will be now. So the whole mystery of time is wrapped up in the vrittis. They create time. And having created time, the complementary aspects of time, space. And then even further complementary aspects, because my physicist friends tell me that matter is the alchemy of space and time. So if we go all the way there, then all there is Purusha, and Prakriti is the alchemy that shifts the three gunas into space time causality, but all as illusory phenomena, because all the time there is only now and there is no time. And this is immortality. This is Kaivalya.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Okay. Well, I think for today we can stop here. Let's come up with